Hello, friends. Welcome to part 3 of my Kendra's Card Challenge number 22 set of cards. This features the My Pretty Things Adventures in Wonderland paper pad, and Erin also has in her shop some things that coordinate with it. There's this gorgeous washi tape that is really beautiful, and it even has a die that will cut out individual elements. And so I'll be using some of those for my focal images. And as well, she's got pre-printed foiled sentiments, like full sheets of silver and gold, so I'll be using that as well. And I did pick up some basic dies from Erin, and I think she actually threw one in as an extra for me, so that was really sweet of her. And so I pulled those out as well because they'll be great for just sort of creating a foundation for creating a focal image. And in a lot of the sketches, Kendra even shows, circular focal images. So let's start with sketch 1, shall we? In parts 1 and part 2, I did all of the prep work to get us here today. And in fact, I think what I'm going to do, I haven't ever done this before, but maybe I'll set this as a premiere video so that we can maybe chat in the live chat. You're going to have to tell me if you're liking that. And I figure as a KCC instructor, I can be in the live chat as well. And that way, if you have questions, you can ask, and maybe I can try to answer you in context as we're watching it together. So this sketch is really cool. One of the things that sometimes I find a little bit challenging with KCC is using pattern papers that are scenes. And this one is a little bit of a scene. But this sketch is really nice for that because you have these 3 strips, and the way that it was cut on paper A is they are cut like from a single section. And so it's sort of like, you know how sometimes you buy pieces of art and it's a triptych, so it's one scene, but then they break it up into like multiple canvases. And so this sort of layout works really well for the scene pattern papers that are scenes. The thing is, you do need to make sure you put them in the right order. I almost had it in the wrong order a moment ago, and I chose to get really precise with this. So I'm using my Pear Blossom Press T-square ruler. I'm actually trying to really line things up really precisely, make sure everything is centered and equal borders and all of that jazz. You don't have to be that precise if you don't want to be. It's a handmade card, so it can be whatever you would like. And with the sketches, now one of the things, if you're new to Kendra's Card Challenge, one of the things to keep in mind as you look at a sketch is that where you see those colored blocks, those are pieces of pattern paper that came from that initial set of 6 sheets of 6x6 pattern paper. And if you watch my part 1, that's where I chose the 6 sheets of pattern paper that I'm crafting with today. And in part 2, I actually show you how to cut all of those pieces. Part of the challenge PDF that you see here on my desk, the first few pages actually show you a cutting guide so that you can cut your 6x6 pattern papers and have no scraps left over. Now, what you see in black, white, or gray on a sketch, that can be whatever you would like. And so you can add more pattern paper. You can use solid color cardstock, an embossed panel, an inky background, whatever your heart desires. And then where Kendra shows strips for where your sentiment may, want to go, or where a focal image might be appropriate, you can substitute that for whatever shape you would like. So for example, on this card, I cut my matte layer smaller, so I have a thinner border, and instead of that circular die cut shape, I just used this floral cluster, which is from the washi tape design. Also by My Pretty Things. It's designed to go with this paper pad. And because I covered up the hummingbird from my original pattern paper, I am taking a hummingbird from the washi and adding that. Okay, so that was card one, and I'll show all the cards at the end again. This is sketch number 2. Sketch number 2 is really great for just blocking. You know how sometimes you do those cards with solid color blocking? This is sort of what that reminds me of, and it's another one that's fairly straightforward. But I do also want to mention that I am using pre-made card bases, which well, first off, I've had these in my stash for years now, so I'm really happy to be finally using them. But secondly, they're actually really convenient. I'm gonna promise myself that I'll make my way and use at least 70% of what I have before I buy more. But I'm really liking using colored card bases because it's just one less extra layer. So that's really convenient. Okay, so now for this, there are 2 pieces of paper. The 2 that I've already glued down, those came from the 6x6 pattern papers. This one that I'm working on here, I am actually using a piece of a cut apart that was on one of the designs from the pattern paper, but it's smaller than what will fit in that space and smaller than what that white rectangle is. So what I did was I just cut some additional layers to like frame it and layer it up so that the piece I really wanted to use, that light, panel with the bird on a branch, I used that, but then I layered it with some solid color cardstock until it was the right size for that space. So you can kind of just do what you need to do to make something fit your needs and what you have in your craft room that you want to use. So I didn't want to cover too much the other pattern papers. I think they're really lovely. And in fact, this paper B, it's so striking. That's the one with the black background. I don't think I've really used pattern papers that have a lot of black in them, and so that's why this set of cards I feel is very different to anything that I've made before, because that particular sheet and the patterns where there's a large portion of black in the background, it really does add a lot of drama to a card. Now for my sentiment here, I'm just winging it at this point because the sketch doesn't actually show, but I just added a little sentiment strip and another floral piece of from the washi. Okay, so now on to sketch number 3. And this is one that has several pieces, but only 4 of them actually come from your 6x6 pattern papers. So I'm going to cut some mats and layers. And one of the nice things about KCC is that Kendra always puts all of the dimensions for all the mats and layers. And in fact, these days, if you want to make your life easy, you can get the mats and layers PDF file. And Kendra has already figured out how to efficiently cut your US letter size solid color cardstock so that you minimize your scraps left over and you have all of the mats and layers that you need to make this set of cards exactly as you see it in the sketches. So I think that's really awesome. And what's more awesome is if you don't want to hand cut that, there's an SVG file available in the shop. So these are extras. These are perks that you can get. And if you are a patron member, you can get a discount when you shop the Kendra's Patreon shop, and as well at the one of the membership tiers, you have the option of either getting, I think, the kit or getting an SVG. So there's lots of options for how to craft KCC, and Kendra definitely tries to make things easy for us. Now, I've got a little bit of low profile foam behind each of these squares, and what I'm gonna do is I'm putting these so that I'm looking for an equal border on the two sides where it's sort of the outer edges. And then what I want to do is I've just got some leftover, I've got this leftover yellow cardstock, which I thought would be really perfect, nice contrast to everything. It's just not quite, I don't quite have enough. It's scrap leftover from something that I found, but it's not enough to stretch all the way across. So what I'm gonna do is I just started cutting them in half because I only had 2 strips, but I knew if I could cut them down, I would have enough to make 3 strips. They just won't actually meet up in the center, and that's fine because as you can see, on the sketch as shown, there's a circle that covers up that middle portion. And so it's going to get covered anyhow, so no one but you will ever know that these aren't full strips going all the way from left to right. And then something that you can always do when you know that you're going to be covering up a portion of a strip of, say, I do this often with Love from Lizzie's pinstripe stickers as well. You don't need to do a full line. You can just have enough so that it's going to get covered by whatever's going to go on top of it. And it's still going to have the effect or the illusion or look of a full strip going all the way across. So I love this circle set of dies from My Pretty Things. So the circle is pretty plain. It's got some stitching detail. It's really nice, but it's just a set of circle nested shape dies. But the scalloped one is really cute. It's a pretty unique. It's a pretty different scallop. It's sort of almost got like it's not just like one rounded scallop. It's almost like, for each scallop, there's actually like 3 little scallops. It's pretty unique, so I like it for that. Now, I've got the washi that coordinates with Adventures in Wonderland. And some of the floral clusters I feel are pretty big, and so I've just started to cut into some of them just to isolate some of the stems from the flowers and maybe make a larger cluster into something a little bit smaller. And for one, that sort of stretches your supplies a little bit, but I'll be honest, that roll of washi is ginormous. So I'm doing it less for stretching my supplies and more for getting, little floral clusters the size and scale that I want. So I'm just gonna try to collage up some elements around this circular focal image here. And I like being able to tuck some things behind, put some things on top. So I'm using a little bit of 3D glue gel to give it some lift and make sure that everything's nice and even. Okay, so now on to sketch number 4. Now this one is interesting. This one, there's like a little bit of a collage of these tiles. And honestly, if you want to be really precise about laying this out exactly as you see it on the sketch, you could totally take the time to sort of figure out how to do that. But because of the papers that I'm using, and I'm flipping them back to front, front to back, this is one of the nice things about using double-sided papers, because you have options. And so it's really nice to be able to, flip to the back to see if maybe you have a better option by using the back side of your papers. And so what I'm going to do is, on when I cut my papers, I cut this particular paper with the hummingbird. I was very careful when I cut that so that I could position that hummingbird somewhere that that I could save it. That or actually, I think for this one, he ended up being somewhere that it worked out nicely. That he was framed well on this tile, and so with that piece and with the bit of pattern paper that has the bird, I really want to make those two pieces kind of the star. So if I use the sketch the way that it's shown, that would have covered up the hummingbird. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to rotate my sketch, and sometimes when I do that, I rotate the actual printout also, just so that I can follow along. And then I've decided I want to mat each of these pieces onto some solid color cardstock. That's not shown in the sketch, but I'm deciding to do that. And so now I'm going to start to kind of lay these out so that it's roughly, it's not going to be identical because of the papers I'm using and how I want to present them. It's not going to be exactly as the sketch shows, but really when you're playing along, yours doesn't have to be exact or precise either. Do what you feel looks good, and especially if you're using something that has a design element that you want to feature. Maybe you do need to take some liberties and shift things around, move things around a little bit. So for example, where you see paper B and paper D on my card, I actually switched those two. So I've got paper D where paper B is shown on the sketch. And the reason for that was because I want the bird to be visible. The bird ended up being kind of saved, I guess, on that particular piece. And so, it happened really nicely that the cuts were worked out so that you could still see a fair amount of the bird. And I think I just got lucky because a lot of times I don't actually choose pattern papers that are scenes or asymmetric pattern papers unless it's like a small repeat pattern, for example, where it doesn't really matter how you cut it up. I mean, those are always the easiest to use if you have, patterns that are non-directional or is just a nice repeat. It's really, really easy to play along because you can orient the paper any which way and you can cover it as much or as little because it's gonna just fade to the background anyhow. But I feel like with these papers, because some of them have some have their own focal images, like this one with the hummingbird, and then the floral one that has the bird on there. And so it would be a real shame to cover it up. So that's why, I'm really working hard to stay true to the sketch, but still adapt it so that the elements of the pattern papers that I want to highlight on my card, I'm still able to do that. So I'm using some low profile foam just to build up these layers, and this ends up being a pretty neat little kind of like collage mosaic or tiles of pattern paper, and it's pretty cool. I mean, it's not identical to the way the sketch is, but you can see that there are enough similarities to where it is clearly derived from the sketch. So when you're playing along with KCC, don't stress too much about making your cards look exactly as you see it on the printout. And in fact, for my card, I added some more pattern paper as a panel behind this sort of mosaic of tiles here. And all of it is on a colored card base. Actually, it's on a colored card base, but then I added the orange layer of solid color cardstock. So I actually covered the the actual color that it was originally. Can you tell I'm just trying to really use up these solid color cardstocks? I didn't even leave any of the solid color showing. But I like how this card turned out. It took a little bit of just playing with the pieces, but in the end I think I got a configuration that I really like. Okay, so now we are on to sketch number 5. So sketch number 5 has 2 pieces of pattern paper, C and D, and there's a panel that is if you cut the panel to 4¼ by 5½, you'll have something that's easy for you to kind of attach these strips to. And then that way, the strip in the center, you can easily glue it down. You can cut it longer than it needs and then glue it down, then trim it off at the edges. So that this white sheet of paper is 4¼ by 5½. And then instead of using like thin strips of paper, which I think might be how Kendra has it shown, it's 1/8 inch strips, I'm just leaving a gap. So I've cut a strip that is I think, Kendra has it denoted as 4¾ by 1½. That's my blue strip there. And I just angled it so that it's going clear off the left and right edge, and then you can just trim off the excess. So see how big these floral clusters are? They're really ginormous. You don't really need too much more than just one of those, but I felt like it was just too much. I like the asymmetric feel of this card, especially with the papers that I chose. Again, on this one, the bird survived. I was really worried when I chose this paper pack to use, because so many of the papers are these lovely, really not like a full scene, but they have some elements that, like this bird, and some of the papers have, say, like the hummingbirds on them. You just wouldn't want to have one kind of partially cut off. And this one worked out really well, so you can see the whole bird. And so I definitely wanted to make sure that it was still visible when on the final card. And the top section where paper C is, that one worked out so that I've got something kind of like a dark color, then a mid-tone, that blue strip in the middle, and then a light tone up top. So I really want to just leave that nice and open. So that's why I'm choosing a smaller floral cluster than the one that I originally was toying with using. And again, I'm just going to snip into these a little bit so that I can make my own little cluster, and then that way I can just build it up so that it's sort of like the size that I want and takes up the space that I want. Sometimes it feels like, it's not enough, and so adding a few leaves here and there just to tuck them in, to fill them out a little, can help a lot. Okay, so that was sketch number 5. On to sketch number 6. Sketch number 6 uses the other two sort of trapezoid pieces. So it's a little bit of like a mix and match between them. And so for this one, I am going to I'm just gonna play around a little bit. Ultimately, at the end, I thought I was gonna use some yellow cardstock on those two flanking, these trapezoids, because on the sketch that's shown as gray, so it can be whatever you would like. And at the end of the day, I decided to just go with white to keep the color really focused on that black cardstock or pattern paper. It's just so striking. And so I just didn't want to add a lot of color. I wanted to really highlight or embrace the contrast of that really dark print or pattern paper against everything else being fairly light, including my paper C here. It's just like a really light blue polka dot. And so I'm gonna get that as centered. Now, when you look at this, it's actually not centered, or it's centered, but it's not equal borders. So just know that you're gonna have a slightly larger border up at the top and bottom. If you wanted, you could always just cut a white panel so that it's an equal border, and then just center the pieces inside. It's kind of up to you. I think I like it where it's not always an equal border all the way around. Just gives you something a little bit different, especially with this where you've got that angled cut and things are a little bit asymmetric anyways. So I kind of like that it's not entirely even. And I've chosen a one of the foiled sentiments, and so I'm just going to take a moment to die cut it. But also, I want to really define these elements here. I feel like with the papers butt up against one another, sometimes when they butt up against one another and it's not like two papers are kind of blending into each other too much, like the white and that lighter cardstock, it can help to add something like Love from Lizzie's pinstripe stickers, or if you don't have them, you can always use just like cut down your solid color cardstock into a thin strip and then glue it down. But the effect of it is that it helps to just frame everything, and then it keeps each of those pieces sort of inside its little box. And I feel like that then makes it really easy for you to identify the shapes. Because before, it was really bugging me a little bit that the white and that light polka dot, they kind of just melded into each other and you couldn't really see like where one ended and the other began. I mean, on camera, it's pretty hard to tell, but even in person, looking at it up close, because that light pattern is just very, very light. So, so I like adding that that bit of Love from Lizzie's pinstripe stickers all the way around each individual piece. So that includes, the diagonal line and the, all of the outside edges. And so to really embrace the gold pinstripe stickers that I added, I used the gold foiled sentiments that is a product that's available at My Pretty Things. And I'm just using, I used their nested circle die to cut out a layer behind it also. And again, I'm going to dip into the washi tape. I really like that there's the coordinating die for that washi tape. I feel like I want to just die cut a couple stretches of it just to always have these florals on hand. Now, if I had to request one thing, it would be more hummingbirds because I I wanted to put a hummingbird on every single one of these cards and I was quickly running out of them because for each stretch of the washi tape, like, it's on a continuous roll. So, there's a pattern. I think it was like maybe about 10 inches or so before it starts to repeat. But what the die does for you is it's 10 inches long, but it cuts these individual clusters. So for every, I'm gonna say 10 inches. I don't remember if I measured, but it's right around there because the die looks like it's sort of a slimline die, or roughly the size of a slimline die. But for each 10-inch, full pattern, there was only one hummingbird. I really wanted more, like 3 or 4. And I wanted more hummingbirds and some that there was only the one hummingbird facing to the left. It would have been nice to have like another hummingbird facing to the right because sometimes I had an arrangement that I really wanted to put the hummingbird facing the other way. So that would be my only request is if Aaron does like more of these washi designs to have to have like multiples because there's so many flowers but there was only the one bird, so it would have been nice to have more. Okay, so now we're well into sketch number 7. Now with this one, if you watched part 2 where I cut my pattern papers, I did leave a little bit of homework for this card. Now, before I actually start to glue things down, while I still had this gold pinstripe stickers out, I decided I'm just going to add a bit of gold to all of these lengths. So this is paper D. And I'm just going to add a stretch of pinstripe stickers to the long edge. And I think it just looks really nice against the black. It kind of almost gives it that sort of gilded look to it. And there's a stretch of or there's like, do you see the purple triangles on the sketch in the printout? During my cutting, I think that was part 2. I didn't actually cut the triangles. What I did was I left that for future Lynn. Well, future Lynn is here, so so all you have to do is just cut those squares and then cut them in half on the diagonal. Now with this pinwheel, I just added, I just butt these sections up against one another and then washi tape them together from behind. And then that way I can just have that as a single piece that I can then sort of just manipulate as together. And you'll find that often when there are sketches that call for pattern papers that butt up against one another, my go-to tip is just use a bit of washi tape to adhere those pieces together, and that way you have them as a single unit and they become easier. Like here I'm just holding the one thing and it's one piece that then I can now position onto my card. For me, this is a lot easier than gluing one piece at a time and making sure that everything is lined up correctly. So because we know that they have to butt up against one another, it's just easier to attach them to one another with a little bit of washi on the back and then position them as a unit onto your card. And these are the little triangles that are I think I'm gonna go back and add some more pinstripe stickers on the diagonals of those triangles because they're not framed in pinstripe stickers. So I might go back and do that. Just so that it's consistent, and that way every bit of pattern paper has that sort of gold gilded framing. And I've got another sentiment from the sheet of gold foiled sentiments, and so I'll use that in the lower right corner here. And that's going to finish up sketch number 7. Okay, so on to sketch number 8. This one's really pretty simple, but it definitely helps to start with this white panel. So this panel measures 4 inches by 5 1/4. And that way I can then just lay these rectangular strips so that they actually run completely off the edges. And then I have that white panel that I can just snip against. And so whenever you see sketches like this and it looks like, where you start with a rectangular piece, but then on the finished card, it's not a rectangle anymore. That's sort of a hint that it might work out best to cut like a layer behind it so that you have something to cut against. And then that way you can make sure that the angles are matching up, because all I've done is I've just butt the papers up against those triangular pieces, which fit really nicely into the corners. And I think one of those strips I actually flipped to the back. I'm not sure which one, but I don't think it was one of the originals. It was from the original 6, but not the side that I chose as the primary side. But as I said, that's why I really prefer to use double-sided pattern papers when I play along with Kendra's Card Challenge, because then it just gives you more options so that when it gets to this point, you can, choose what looks best. And since I haven't glued down this panel, I can do that same trick with my Love from Lizzie's pinstripe stickers, where I can hang a bit of this off the edge and then just snip it off against the edge. Also, I've got a pretty big circular sentiment that's gonna go right in the middle of this card, and so I'm doing that other trick of not putting down full strips. And that way you can save your pinstripe stickers. They're not that expensive, but I like to make it stretch, and if I don't need to use a full strip, then I prefer not to. And that way I have more to use later. And so I've got, this is another example of, you can kind of make these sketches what you need to make of them to suit your needs. So by that I mean the sketch as shown on the printable is a landscape oriented card. I'm gonna rotate mine so that it's portrait, and the reason for that is because my sentiment is circular, so that would have fit on a landscape card oriented card also. But with my pattern papers, one of them feels I don't think it's actually directional, but for some reason that particular pattern in the upper left corner, it feels directional to me. Like it feels like this is the correct orientation, and for whatever reason, to my eyes, it's probably just me, but this just looks better as a portrait oriented card. So that's what I've made it. Okay, so now on to sketch number 9. And this is one where I would definitely recommend cutting an extra panel shown in white here, so that you have something to glue against and trim off of. Just like I was saying for the previous one, that way you can just snip something clear off the edge. Okay, so now here's a little secret, friends. I actually cheated a little bit on this one. Now, when I was doing my cuts initially, I left for future Lynn to cut that piece right there at the very top. I was supposed to cut that in half to make 2 triangles. And because they were going to be small pieces, I was like, I'll just let future Lynn figure that part out. So I've got this going on here. I've got this tiled, and now I just want to play with my options. So I had it where I initially had it. That was as shown in the sketch. Now what I'm going to do is just have a little bit of a play. And I'm just going to flip, my papers back and forth. I'm going to see what works, what doesn't work. And I'm not going to cut that piece in half. Don't tell on me, friends. But, find your tips and tricks and ways to make things easy. Because look, this can still fill this panel easy peasy, and it gets the gist of this sketch. So this white panel measures 2 3/4 by 5. 2 3/4 by 5. And I just ran some lines of dry adhesive across the whole thing. And then what I'm going to do is I took this first piece and I just made sure for the angle that I set it at, I took the bottom left corner is on the left edge. The top right corner is on the right edge. So do you see how that's lined up? So for each piece of pattern paper, the bottom left corner of that strip is aligned on the left edge of my white piece of paper, and the top right corner is lined up on the right edge. And now I can just trim very minimally, just a little bit off, and all the way around all 4 edges. And I have something that looks not identical to the sketch, but pretty much, the gist of it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because I really wanted to use some of that black. It was very striking black, and I wanted to actually have the 2 pieces, top and bottom, to really kind of be end caps, but I wanted a little bit of that black in the middle as well. And so that's really the reason why I decided to really make this one my own. But I also feel like if you approach it this way, it's also maybe a little bit simpler. You don't have that little itty bitty triangle, those 2 small triangle pieces to contend with. And so, when I was cutting, I kind of put it off, cutting that particular piece. And now I'm glad that I did, because I had that full rectangle strip, that shorter piece in the center there that's got the black background, and it worked out really nicely. Now I want to use some of the peel-offs again, so that I can clearly have a very clearly defined edge where that diagonal panel we just created, where that butts up against the paper A on the left. And of course, why waste a full strip of peel off when you can just use an inch here and an inch there and cover it up with, this is actually one of the cut aparts that's part of the pattern papers, and one of the foiled sentiments that is part of the sentiment sheet. So I'm just going to add that to this with a little bit of low profile foam on the back to give it a little bit of lift. And as well, I'm going to add my sentiment with a little bit of that low profile foam on the portion that hangs off the edge, because I want the sentiment to be partly on top of this focal image and then have it also kind of hang off of that rectangle. And so just to make sure it's like a little, it's kind of even Steven and nice and level, I'm going to put a little bit of foam on that right edge just to bring it up to the same thickness as the ephemera piece. Well, it's not really ephemera, it's a cut apart piece. And that'll be it for this card. Now, you could go back with like another pass and add some bling to all of this, but I don't think I'll do that on this card set of cards. But normally that would be like a lot, like my final pass for all of my cards. I would assemble them all, and then once they're all assembled, come back as a last finishing touch with some bling. But I'm gonna skip that step. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit more again on on sketch number 10. Okay, so here's sketch number 10, and paper E is covered quite a bit by those gray and white rectangles. Well, gray and white can be whatever you want. I'm going to choose for them to not be there. And then paper D is this little circle, which I did punch, or maybe I die cut, I can't remember. But I'll be honest, I think I want just a nice floral cluster there, and so we ended up not using that piece of pattern paper. So cheating a little bit. But I do feel like this is one of the rare, few occasions where you get such a large piece of the pattern. And so if you're using a print like this one, where it's very asymmetric and it's almost like it's a scene, you kind of, I just don't want to cover that. And I almost feel like that portrait of the kind of like that pendant, of the rabbit, that almost looks like it's sort of, those rectangle pieces. Okay, maybe I'm stretching a little bit. But I love how that card turned out. Okay, here we are at card number 11. This one's got this really neat sort of a herringbone pattern. And here's my recommendation. Do a little bit of dry fitting, but basically the way that I'm dry fitting this, again, remember I said whenever I see pattern paper that's, butts up against one another, I like to just washi tape them together. That's going to be really helpful here. So these strips here, they're just right up against each other, 90-degree angles. And so all I've done is just tape those pieces together. And I use a lot of little bits of washi tape. And now it's just one big piece, and I can add the 3 strips to the bottom. And see how I've basically made my own little bit of pattern paper here? Well, now it's just one unit, and I can then fit it onto this white bit of, you could use like copy paper or a bit of cardstock, and that bit of cardstock measures 3 3/4 by 5. And I'm going to use that, don't glue it down first, but use that so that you can glue down this quilted pattern. And you just need to make sure that your pattern hangs completely off the edges. So that's it. Now, I feel like this would have been a lot harder to do if you actually wanted to kind of lay each of these down one by one. This honestly, for me, for my brain and how it works, this just works a lot easier than trying to line it up and then glue each piece one by one. Now, if you wanted, you could do that. Kendra gives you some guidance as to where to start to position that first bottommost strip. But, you know, for how my brain works, this just feels easier to me. So this is how I've approached it. So I mentioned this in, I think, maybe my first video in this series. On the KCC team, Kendra, Beth, and I are instructors, and we're tasked with creating these more in-depth videos showing our entire process. And the reason why there's 3 of us is because each of us approaches a card in a different way. And so if, you know, how I approach things makes sense to you, then maybe give it a try. If how I do things is confusing to you, maybe watch, you know, Kendra's video and Beth's video to see how they've approached the same sketch. And you can watch anyone on the design team put together their sketches, but Kendra, Beth, and I, every month, we're doing full sets, full instructional videos. So guaranteed you will see us do each of these sketches multiple times throughout the quarter. So that's the difference. Like, I definitely feel like you should watch really any of our video designers because all of them are fabulous, and everybody kind of thinks differently, creates differently, and explains things differently as well. So find the designer who's like kind of speaking your language. But the reason why I want to direct you to Kendra and Beth is because as instructors for KCC, we're guaranteeing to have, you know, multiple videos where we've made full sets and shown you our full process for them. So it'll be a little bit easier for you to find a tutorial on, or really multiple tutorials on any one sketch. Okay, so that was sketch number 11. I used my love from Leslie's pinstripe stickers really came to play today. So I did that same trick of adding the peel-offs to each of the edges. Now onto I'm well into sketch number 12 now, and what I've done is where you see white, I've added some additional pattern papers, and then the paper E, that pink strip going across, I'm pretty sure that's the side of the pattern paper that I did not choose, I think, if I remember right. But like I said, it's, you know, when you're using double-sided papers, use whichever side you want, whatever looks good to you. And so I wanted to use this orange pattern, and orange and blue are complements to one another, and plus this particular stretch of blue pattern paper, kind of like a teal almost, has these cute little butterflies, which I'm going to try to kind of preserve. And especially that orange one, like orange coral one. I guess there's 2 orange ones. But here's the thing, because of where those butterflies land on this pattern, I don't want to put the circle as suggested on the left side, because that's going to actually cover up those cute little butterflies. And so instead, I am going to put my circle on the right-hand side. And the other reason why I wanted to do that is because a lot of the floral clusters, they tend to kind of curve in such a way that I feel like they work better in the lower right-hand corner. And so I knew I wanted to use one of those as well. And since it looks better in the right-hand corner, I wanted to put that circle over on the right also. And I'm also going to deviate a little bit with those banner flags. I'm deviating a lot, actually. But ultimately, you'll see at the end of the day, my card still looks pretty similar to the sketch. But what I've done with the banner flags is I actually overlapped the middle one over the two side ones. So the two side ones came in a little closer to one another, and then that middle banner, the longer one, overlaps them. Whereas I think in the original sketch, they are actually butt up against one another. But I wanted to kind of push them in a little bit closer to one another, because I want more of that orange background to be visible and have just a little bit more like open area. Really focus this little collage unit that I'm making here into this particular space, and leave some nice open space on the left side. And I'm just going to town with the Love from Lizzie's pinstripe stickers. I've even added them to this little sentiment strip, which, again, these sentiments are foiled already, and they are from these foiled sheets that Erin sells in her shop, My Pretty Things. And so now that I have all of my individual pieces, I can start to collage them together. I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with leaving open spaces, because there's quite a lot of that white circle that's still visible, and really in the past that would have felt very unfinished to me, but I like how that turned out at the end. Okay, so then this is sketch number 13. And this too has a really nice large panel that is very visible. So again, this might be another panel that's good for like larger prints. But one of the pattern papers is this is paper B here, that big banner flag. Okay, I got so lucky with this one, friends. Look at how well that's framed. This for sure is not the side of the pattern paper that I chose originally, because I don't remember cutting around her to preserve her. So I just flipped to the back and noticed she's pretty well framed and perfectly framed in this rectangle. And so I'm still going to cut it into a banner to follow the sketch, but I guess I'm getting close to the end, and maybe maybe my creativity finally kicked in, and so I'm starting to deviate a lot from the sketches, but I left off that second I left off the second banner flag entirely because I want her to be visible. It worked out so, randomly that, see that backside? That's the side I originally chose. And it just so happened she fit beautifully on this piece still. And so I could not hide that behind the other side. So it's it's such good luck, and when you have good luck like that, you don't squander it. So I'm gonna just have the one banner flag, and instead of putting my sentiment on top of a second banner flag that overlaps, I'm just going to add just a little square at the bottom here, and I love this. She's not actually reading a book. She's just kind of curled up in this chair playing with a little kitty cat, but it feels like, she has the posture. It kind of feels like, I feel like I did this as a kid, just curl up into a chair and read a good book. So the sentiment was dream big and write your own story. I love that turned out so nicely, that she was kind of preserved, I guess. Okay, so now on to sketch 14, and I'm just gonna cheat a little bit on this one too, friends. Okay, so it's not really cheating because the pieces of pattern paper that I originally cut, I am using. So here I start with the panel that's 4 by 5 1/4. That's sort of in that coral color. And I'm gonna start with my corner pieces of the pattern papers. And this is what I've got here. These are scraps. So they're not really exactly fit, the right fit and size. But all I'm doing is I'm just making sure that on the visible, edges, that the spacing is equal, about 1/8 of an inch, all the way around. But you can see, I'm gonna put this bit of, this is another one of the cut aparts. I'm gonna put this cut apart right over where that gap was because my extra bits of pattern paper, the blue pieces, they were scraps that just happened to kind of almost fit just right. They were the right height, which is 1.5 inches, but they just weren't the right length, or at least the bottom one wasn't the right length. So no problem. I'll just cover up whatever the gap is with a different shape. So on the sketch, it suggests a circle, and Kendra does tell you the size of the circle, but I need to hide a gap, so so I'm gonna use this square instead. And boy, I had a heck of a time trying to make that sentiment work before I gave up and found a smaller scaled sentiment so that I could still use this floral cluster and have this gold foiled sentiment beside it. So again, just using a little bit of low profile foam to lift this up. You can see that awkward shape in the center there. It all worked out at the end of the day. And then I'm just going to layer this up and add again some of the washi that is a part of my pretty things. And I think for this whole set of 15 cards, I think I must have cut I think 3 sets of that washi design, or maybe 2.5, something like that. And I still have a lot left over. So that really lasts a good long time. Okay, now on to sketch number 15, the very last sketch. So here again, where you see white on the sketch, I am bringing in some additional pattern paper, and I've got the paper F. Just that little stretch there. That's the only pattern paper from the initial set of 6 that I chose, but I'm gonna bring in some more scraps because along the way I've been, cutting into, these other full sheets just to bring in some more pattern papers here and there. So I do have scraps that I want to try to use up, and this is one of those. And I've really grown to like these patterns with the really dark black background. It's really not a pattern paper that I use very often. I don't think I ever see pattern papers that have black and so much black in the background, but I really like it. And so I wanted to use it even more. And so I've brought it back into just a lot of pattern on pattern. But this rectangular panel here, I did cut to the size that is indicated on this sketch, and I am going to leave it fairly open. But again, I'm kind of mirroring the sketch. So if you look at the sketch, you'll see that that strip, that gray strip, is on the left. Well, I don't want to put my strip on the left because there's the bird there, and I don't want to cover the bird. And so I'm actually positioning everything so that as much of that bird is still visible. And that includes this rectangular panel here, which on the sketch, if you look at it, it's more centered up and down. But if I centered it, I would be, again, covering up the bird. So I've kind of pushed this a little bit downward in order to keep that bird, like as much of the bird visible as possible. And then so the last little bits I'll add to this card are my that lovely floral cluster and a foiled sentiment, which I've left kind of a lot of that white kind of still, a nice big white spot. And that I think helps to, because there's like that really strong black pattern paper, I feel like leaving, more open white spot just helps to brighten and lighten the card a little bit so that it doesn't feel so heavy with the black. Plus a lot of the black, that pattern paper with the black background, a lot of that's getting covered up. But I do feel like, I think I said this earlier, that like I'm getting more and more comfortable with leaving white open spaces. My natural reaction is to like throw a critter or you know what I mean, like to fill that space up more. But I think there's so much pattern on this card. It actually helps your eyes rest a little bit to have a bit of just open blank area. And so that way, and that's also the reason why I've left a lot of white space around the sentiment as well, just to like give your eyes a place to rest, especially where the sentiment is and where I kind of want to pull some focus and attention, because otherwise there's a lot of pattern on pattern on pattern on that one. All right, that was my last card. Now let's take a final look at all 15. And as I'm showing you this, don't forget, I plan to give away this entire set of 15 cards to one person. And so there'll be a giveaway form in the description box below if you want to just expand that. You do get extra entries for watching all of the videos in this series, and this is the third of 3 videos in this series. So if you missed parts 1 and 2, then you can always go back and watch those and get extra entries into the giveaway. Not only am I giving away all 15 of these cards to one US winner, I'm also going to give away some bonus tickets to the Paper Escape. And so the Paper Escape is a virtual card making retreat that is coming up April 11th and 12th. If you're watching this after the retreat has already happened, day number 1 is completely free and open to the public, so you can still watch that over on the Paper Escape YouTube channel. Day number 2 is exclusively for paid ticket holders, and you can help yourself to a bonus ticket at any time, even after the event. And if you're getting the bonus ticket after the event, you'll be watching the live recording of day 2 of the retreat, which is a combination of live classes and a pre-recorded class. So, but I am giving away tickets, and I will draw for the winners before the day of the retreat. So if you don't already have a ticket, here's your chance to win one. Just expand the description box below and enter for a chance to win. Thank you to all of my channel members for supporting me and being a part of my journey. I really appreciate you. Thank you to everybody who uses my affiliate links when you shop. I really appreciate that. All of this monetary support really does help me to keep everything going. From videos and tutorials here on YouTube to putting out new releases, and now putting on crafty retreats for everybody. Thanks again, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.